what to do when you crash your drone.
You land and you say, well, I'm never doing that again. Is it pilot error? And do you need either retraining or to readjust your personal limits?
The size and scope of the operation. There's a map, and it will show you the GPS coordinates of the last known received signal. So it helps you kind of narrow it down. Good morning again, and welcome to another weekly episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. My name's Ian. I've got Finn with me here as well. And this week, we're going to be talking about what to do when you crash your drone, what the process is and how to deal with it, the paperwork you might need to do, and the processes and how you would learn from it. So let's get right to it. Finn's going to take it away.
All right, yeah. So by the end of today, we're going to know some of the pre-flight considerations to prevent an accident from occurring, some best practices in the moment of an emergency occurring, some tips if you've lost your aircraft somewhere, and some other tips for getting it back, maybe repairing your drone, and what are the legal requirements if you've had some sort of incident. First, let's talk about some of the pre-flight precautions. So this is one thing that we always try to teach our students in every type of aviation. Almost every incident or accident is avoidable with good planning. Almost every crash that has ever occurred in aviation could have been prevented by some form of good planning. So for drones, for our RPAS, some of the pre-flight precautions that you might want to be aware of. You want to make sure the aircraft is working. The aircraft is not broken, in working condition. You want to make sure you've performed a thorough site survey, taking note of wind conditions and obstacles. Some of the obstacles that people sometimes miss, power lines and trees if they're in front of other trees, because trees on trees, it's hard to tell depth perception wise. Make sure that you have a strong GPS signal. Ensure to test your obstacle avoidance and make sure to set up return to home. Make sure that if you're using if your controller is one of the controllers where you plug it into your phone, you want to make sure that the charging port is clear, free of debris or moisture. A very common accident, or not accident, but a very common issue that people have is if that your phone becomes disconnected from the controller, you lose your screen, and then you may lose some spatial awareness.
Can you bring those slides back up just before? Because like every one of these slide points, and I came into this one cold, but Finn, I feel like I feel attacked.
Cam wrote these slides in case. So
the phone one, that's from personal experience.
Okay, I was gonna say, can you bring the slide list up again? So so the site survey one is definitely like, it's so easy to set up something and then not think of where you are, where the power lines are, or what's overhead, like a vertical takeoff for one thing. Like there's tree canopy is a big part of that. The weak GPS one's a really good one, and I have a really good anecdote for that one right away. And it also involves an FPV drone. But we were in a valley filming something, and the GPS signal was weak in the valley because it was just a really steep valley. And what happens is, for DJI's FPV drone, if you don't have a full GPS signal, it will range limit you because you can fly a drone without GPS. It also relies on the accelerometers and the vision positioning system. So GPS is critical for return to home functionality and for knowing where the drone is, and for hovering precision, it augments it. I was in a situation where it wouldn't get it, so I basically had to fly up at least 150 feet or whatever the maximum ceiling without GPS was, and that actually, then it was able to take off. And I did that, took off, went all the way up to that point, and then brought it back to the ground and restarted the flight now that it had a differential lock on the GPS. So if I hadn't have done that, if I had a return to home issue, like a lost signal, the drone would have probably gone into the trees or something, because there is no collision avoidance on the FPV drone. So yeah, that one was a good one. Yeah, no, the other ones, like the phone charging point, that's a good one. Cam, do you have a story about that?
Yeah, so I was flying, we were on a road trip actually up to Revelstoke, and I was flying like, outside of this main city, kind of in between like Salmon Arm, and I was trying to get a shot of a lake, and yeah, your phone, like I have a Mini 4 right now, previously had the Mini 2 with the phone mounted screen, and basically I thought it was actually a problem with the drone itself, but it would constantly disconnect. So I was in flight and it would start disconnecting, and it wasn't actually the drone, it was the fact that my phone charging port was dirty. And just naturally, like as you charge your phone in that, debris gets in there. So I had to clean it out, and I was able to clean it out and then get a clean kind of signal. But yeah, it was kind of scary because you're up in flight, and like I had the drone within visual line of sight, and then my dad was with me, so that was cool. But like it wasn't. If something went wrong, like you could still get it back on the ground. But yeah, it's kind of scary when you're trying to line up a shot or something, and you just get I think it's like gray or something. You get it when
Loss of video signal.
Exactly, yeah, loss of video signal.
Well, that's a good point. It's not just about, because I thought you were talking about charging, like your phone died during the process, but yeah, like you could have spotty USB signal and then your terminal's not going to work. That's why I'm such a huge fan, though, of like using the smart controllers now. The cost increase it's less than buying a dedicated phone for flying a drone. That's for sure. Because these are like what, $350, $400 as an upgrade.
And the screen is bigger,
brighter.
It's brighter. It's a very, very large quality of life increase.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the other side of it is, so this is the RC2. I think that's what this one's called. Yeah, DJI RC2. So this is the most current integrated smart controller. The gimbals on this are so much better than the gimbals on the RC-N2, which is the entry level. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it's oof.
Boo.
The N2 version is has got the spherical gimbals, which are really not great. Definitely not as good or as precise as these. So you get better controller, better screen, better situational awareness. You're not relying on your phone. It's all around better.
Some other pre-flight precautions. So you want to make sure your drone is fully calibrated with no errors. So if it's been a while, you could do a compass calibration or an IMU calibration. When you're doing the compass calibration, just make sure you're not near anything metal. So don't do it on your concrete driveway with steel rebar that's underneath, or
storm drains,
or like if you're on a roof of a building, if there's a lot of steel underneath you, it could affect the compass calibration. And then
buried cable.
Exactly. And then the IMU, just follow the instructions on screen. Make sure the area that is going is flat. One time Ian and I were doing an IMU calibration on a Matrice 30, and we thought the ground that we were on was flat. And after like 20 minutes of it not calibrating, we like moved it to a different section of ground, and it immediately calibrated. And like we were going crazy trying to calibrate this thing, and it was because the ground was like very, very, very slightly tilted, and it couldn't do it.
It wasn't perfectly level.
No, it wasn't perfectly level. This was on the roof of a building, so like roofs of buildings can sometimes have a little bit of variation on them. Yeah. This never happens when it's not freezing outside, because it was freezing outside when we were doing this.
Yeah, patience was wearing thin.
Exactly. So we mentioned a moment ago return to home. So we're going to mention briefly like what is return to home and how return to home actually works. So there's a couple different types of return to home. The first one that probably most newer pilots will be associated with is low battery. So when these aircraft get to a certain battery percentage, and I believe you can adjust the battery percentage that this is at, once it gets there, it will automatically start returning to home. Now you can cancel the low battery return to home. It's returning to home for a reason, but these aircraft do have a low battery return to home. When it gets to a certain battery percentage, the aircraft will try to return to the home point. Basically, it wants to make sure that it can land before it runs out of battery. So the other one would be lost signal return to home. These aircraft also you can set it up in the event of a lost link. What is the aircraft going to do? For the default for DJI drones, and the recommended default for probably 90% of scenarios, is if you lose control, if you lose your link with your aircraft, the best practice is to just have it return to home.
Yes.
In this case, the aircraft will most likely climb to the return to home altitude that you've set. It will navigate itself back to the home point and then land safely. When you are doing a site survey, one of the things that you might want to or should take into account is what you're going to set your return to home altitude at. Your return to home altitude should be above every obstacle in your immediate vicinity, but still below the legal maximum of 400 feet AGL. So if you're in a wooded area and you can see, okay, the tallest tree is about 70 feet, maybe you'd set your return to home altitude at 120 feet or something like this. You want to make sure your return to home altitude will clear every obstacle, because not every aircraft has obstacle avoidance, and not every aircraft will have obstacle avoidance during the return to home process. So it
Yeah.
is possible that your aircraft could begin its return to home process and impact an obstacle, which is counterintuitive to the safe return of the aircraft.
Okay, so Mini 4 Pro, there is no adjustment for battery return to home point or warning or minimums.
Okay, so I think it's around 20%. It will just automatically
Yeah.
return to home.
Yeah, I think that might be a Go 4 thing. So like the Mavic 2 Pro, the previous generation stuff had, I do remember there being some adjustability in early days, but DJI has a track record of taking away user control.
Well,
So-
probably in this case, there are probably a lot of people who were setting it to 0 and then crashing.
Yeah. Well, for sure. Like their interests are in their liability. So
So then the other type of return to home is human-initiated return to home. So Ian's going to flip around the controller and point to the return to home button. You press and hold the return to home button, and the aircraft will enter its return to home mode. Now,
Yeah.
again, same considerations as a lost link scenario. What's your altitude? What is the obstacle avoidance? Some DJI aircraft have what's called smart return to home, where they will avoid obstacles. Others will just try and take the shortest path between the place where it is and where they will avoid obstacles. So they will use the obstacle avoidance cameras to avoid anything. Some will just do a straight line from where they are to the return to home point, regardless if there are any obstacles within the area. In here, we've got the options: bypass, brake, and off. Bypass will bypass obstacles. Brake, it will stop and hover at that location. And off is it will run into anything.
yeah. And the Mini 4 Pro has omnidirectional obstacle avoidance, so it can see
That's right.
in all directions. Whereas Mini 3 Pro was only forwards and backwards, no left or above or anything else. But they've been creative in how they set up these cameras on these things now that they can actually see in pretty wide angles. So
Yeah, so you want to, but when you're setting up your return to home, just make sure that you double check which setting it's on and that it's the one that you want. So we've got a video here on DJI's return to home process. Okay, yeah, so we've got the manually triggering return to home. So this was going to show the button here, and you press and hold the button. Low battery return to home. You can see low battery return to home. You can cancel low battery return to home, but be aware that when you're canceling it, there's a reason why it's doing this. And then the fail-safe return to home, which is if you lost link with the aircraft. So
with the battery side of it, there is a point where the drone will go into forced landing mode.
and this is going to go straight down.
yeah, so it's going to continue to descend no matter where it is. You can still control the drone's horizontal position, but now you've lost the ability to climb. You can descend faster, but you can't climb or stop the descent. So,
Yeah. I've had that happen with our older Phantom 4
Yeah.
when it was cold, and we put the drone up and it immediately started descending, and all I had was the lateral movement.
Yeah.
Because it was giving me a low voltage because I didn't even think it was that cold, but I guess in retrospect it was cold enough that it was causing me problems.
That's the same as a few weeks ago we talked about my Mini 1, the Mavic Mini, having that problem downwind. I did go and cycle the batteries after that. I haven't flown it since. So, but like I said, we basically kind of retired it anyway because it's an old drone.
Exactly. So, what are some best practices when you're on site? So that was some of the best practices before you go flying. Best practices while flying to avoid an accident. Don't get wrapped up in your shot and forget your surroundings. So if you're flying a drone that is above 250 grams, you definitely can't get wrapped up in your shot without a visual observer, without
Yeah.
violating the cars.
Yeah.
If it's a micro drone and the beyond visual line of sight requirements are not as stringent, if you're staring at your screen for a long period of time, it's very, very easy to lose sight of the drone. I remember, like, Cam and I were doing some filming last week, and he asked me to do an orbit of the office building. So I'm doing an orbit of the office building, and then he's like, okay, that's good. Cam was keeping the drone in visual line of sight, and I looked up, and I was like, I have no clue.
Well,
This
not
was like-
only that,
This was like 25-second orbit. Like,
the other thing is your eyes are focused a meter away from you.
yeah, that's
it
right.
takes a second or two for your eyes to refocus long distance, like from short focus to very long distance.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
So it was a micro drone, and Cam had eyes on the drone, so he was able to be like, "Is right beside you, doofus." And then I looked up, and there it was. It was like literally like there.
well, in a noisy environment, you're not going to hear it.
Yeah, we were right on the road by the office. Our office is on a major artery here, so it was quite noisy. Couldn't hear the drone, and then I had my head down looking for 25 seconds to get this orbit good, to make it a good orbit, and no way. Like I did not have eyes on the drone at the end of that.
I'll throw out there as well. Like, it's obviously you don't want to completely rely on the obstacle avoidance sensors, but especially like I had a crash with my Mini 2, and that doesn't have sensors on the side. So I was doing like
It didn't have any. The Mini 2.
Yeah, it had the downward ones, but I mean.
Oh, that's just positioning.
Really count, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, had my VO, and you can't at like a far distance, like you can't necessarily see if the drone is going to crash, especially with a micro. But yeah, especially important. Don't get too wrapped up in the shot, especially if you're flying an older model that doesn't have those sensors.
I had a shot with a Mini 1, and this is totally on this. It's your head's down looking at the shot, and I was doing a sideways tracking shot of some boats on a sandbar, and it was, the drone was tracking right, and all of a sudden there's tree in front of the frame, like it just slowly comes in and there's tree leaves, and I'm like, uh-oh, that means I'm near a tree. So I immediately stop, and then I yaw, because yaw is safe, you're not moving or translating, and I yaw to the right, and there's tree, and then a yaw to the left, and I've gone into this like 3 by 3 foot hole in the tree, and I'm in the tree at the moment, and I'm just like, any gust of wind, this thing's going to get nailed by a tree. And it's probably 500 meters out. It's a micro drone, so I'm a little bit farther away, and we're in the middle of nowhere type situation. But there's no way I'm getting it back if this happens. So total law, like, visual observer wouldn't have been able to tell if I was behind or in front of the tree. So I was able to track the drone back out the way I came, but I yawed towards the hole in the tree and went back out the hole of the tree, and then immediately came back and landed. And
especially if it's in a dense area, buildings, people, foliage, make sure that your VO can see the full flight path and that the VO doesn't have to continuously relocate either.
Yeah.
If the VO is outside of shedding distance, they need to be able to maintain constant communication.
Yeah, you need like a WhatsApp phone call or something.
Yeah, so WhatsApp phone call, walkie-talkie, Discord call, something like that, FaceTime. Anything that can be fairly immediate. Make sure you're flying within your own personal limits and understanding the technical capabilities and the limits of your aircraft. Do not fly in wind that is too strong for your aircraft. Do not fly in temperatures that are outside of the temperature range of your aircraft.
You know, one thing we should add it's not just your aircraft, it's you, the pilot.
That's right. So we all have our own personal limits of what we consider good to go, good to fly in, right? Yeah. Your personal limits may be a higher limit than what's in your operating manual. That's okay. If you're flying an aircraft that says a very common one for these smaller drones is, I think it's like 36 kilometers an hour wind.
10 meters a second.
10 meters a second. But if you're like, you know what, even at that 10 meters a second, I don't feel comfortable flying this aircraft. That's no problem. You're not doing anything wrong. That's actually exercising good pilot decision making.
Yeah.
Build out your own personal limit and stick to it.
It goes the same for like flying in poor weather.
Exactly.
Yeah. You don't have to go right to the minima.
No, the Class G minima for manned aircraft are 3 nautical miles if you're above 1,000 feet, it's like 3 nautical miles visibility, 500 feet from clouds. I've flown in those conditions. It was not on purpose. I either have to fly in these conditions or land in this field, kind of thing. Yeah. And these are not fun conditions to fly in. You land and you say, well, I'm never doing that again. I landed immediately in this scenario. We can maybe talk about it on a future episode.
The backroom IFR special.
Well, okay. This was okay. I won't tell this story now, but because it's not related to drones at all.
Yeah. Something that is related to drones. Mm-hmm. I've been asked to do a FPV fly through of an event. Mm-hmm. So it's an indoor event, and I went back and first I'm going to briefly talk. We're going to talk more about this. So actually, this is because everyone's live here right now, but we'll record a bit more. But I'm going to be doing a fly through of a charity event inside a building, and the only thing I really wanted to bring up right now is the personal limits. I've been practicing for it because it's not something that I've done a lot of before, and it's potentially pretty high liability because there's going to be some apparently very famous and wealthy people there. So the last thing I want to do is ruin someone's hair. So it's definitely something that I need to take an assessment of myself and make sure I'm comfortable with it and understand what the risks are. So one thing I've been doing is flying the drone inside the hangar because it's got a polished white floor, and the vision position system does not work at all. Like, it was actually hard right drifting through the hangar, and it was like I had to force stop it before it would hit a wall. So,
and the other thing to be aware of is interference, like RF interference. So cell towers or anything that could produce an RF signal that could potentially interfere with the connection between your aircraft and the controller. DJI controllers are pretty good with electrical interference. Some of the older models, we've mentioned before with the original Mavic Mini that the band of frequency that one used was more susceptible to RF interference.
Yeah, it was only 5.8.
Yeah.
So it didn't have the robustness of a 2.4 failover.
Your best planning fails, and something does end up happening. What should you do? So first thing you need to do is you need to stay calm. If you've had some sort of incident, panicking or acting foolishly will just make the situation worse. Consult your emergency procedures. You've made them for a reason.
Yeah.
And make sure your other crew members are alerted to the situation and they're aware of the emergency procedures. Follow your checklists and conduct your emergency procedures. Let the training that you've done kick in. If you lose your drone, some tools for retrieving your drone. So Ian's going to pull up the Find My Drone here on Cam's drone here.
Give me a
so we
second
can
to do
hear what that sounds like. So the Find My Drone is a DJI feature where if you've lost your drone in a field somewhere, it will start beeping annoyingly at you. Now, it's not the loudest beep, but it's better than nothing. So that's the Find My Drone beep. Again, it's not the loudest beep, but...
Yeah, well, what it's doing is it's sending a pulse to the motors, and it's causing the motors to, like, create that noise, right? So it's the ESC beeping is what it's called. But what it'll also do is on the controller, there's a map, and it will show you the GPS coordinates of the last known received signal. So it helps you kind of narrow it down. And then we'll do that for the goggles as well, the FPV one. And it will actually also replay. You can get it to replay the last footage over and over again to kind of see like which tree it was.
Right.
So,
the next thing is, so that was about a crash. The other major emergency that we could have as pilots is called a flyaway. So the legal definition of a flyaway is that if the aircraft loses connection to the drone and is flying in an unwarranted manner, potentially away from the operation area. So it is not considered a flyaway if you lose link and the drone returns to home, because that is warranted. We want that to happen. Let's say that you are doing a flight and the drone loses connection to the controller while the drone is moving and it continues to move away from the area of operation. That would be considered a flyaway. In the event of a flyaway, you need to be able to do a couple of things. First, you need to be able to note your last known location, altitude, speed, and battery life remaining. So altitude, direction, estimated speed, battery life remaining.
Flight time remaining,
fuel on board. If this aircraft is flying towards controlled airspace, you need to inform the airspace owner of this flyaway. The generic number for this would be 1-800-WX-BRIEF. You press 1 to report an emergency. This is not the fastest way to report an emergency.
Yeah, it's not the most efficient.
There are emergency contact numbers for your general area. So we have these things called flight information regions. These are like general areas of flight information service. Or if you are operating near or in controlled airspace, normally when you submit your job via NavDrone, they will give you an emergency contact number.
Yeah.
If NavDrone gives you an emergency contact number, this is the phone number you should use.
Yeah, and it'll most likely be the tower.
Exactly. So if you call one of the generic numbers, either the flight service or 1-800-WX-BRIEF and report an emergency, they're just actually going to connect you to the nearest tower. Like they'll patch you over or give you the phone number. So you could, in theory, lose up to maybe 1 minute to 90 seconds, which during a flyaway, 1 minute to 90 seconds, this thing's cooking at 10 meters a second.
It's 10% of its battery life.
Yeah. We have successfully recovered the drone from the emergency. We've reported our flyaway. So now we have to talk about incident reporting, repairs, and other tips. From a regulatory perspective, all incidents and accidents need to be logged. Your log needs to have information about this occurrence, as well as root cause analysis and corrective action. Mm-hmm. You need to have an idea why this happened and how to prevent it in the future. If your corrective action includes some sort of action plan like retraining or adjustment of standard operating procedures, you need to complete that action plan before you go flying again. You cannot say, okay, I need additional training, I'll do it later, and then go flying again. You have to complete that additional training before you go flying. This is not an episode of Mayday. The root cause analysis and corrective action does not need to be overly complicated. an example could be, so an example of a loggable incident would be, or incident or accident, would be if the drone flies outside of the boundaries of the area of operation. Anytime you exceed those boundaries, that is considered an incident or an accident.
Yeah, unplanned.
So let's say that I'm doing a survey of a field, and I say, okay, the absolute boundary, the fence of the field is the boundary of the area of operation. And let's say I'm doing this, and a bird flies near the aircraft, and I pick up the controller and move it outside of the boundaries of the field in order to avoid this bird. Okay, this is now an incident because I've exceeded the limits of the boundaries of the area of operation.
Mm-hmm.
The root cause analysis could be traffic avoidance. Or, if you think about it in another way, the root cause analysis could have been inappropriate selection of field boundary. Why didn't I leave a buffer on this field?
Yeah, give yourself enough room.
Exactly. So then I could say, okay, my corrective action is going to be, in my SOP, I'm going to put on, from now on, if I say I'm doing a lot of fields, like this is my gig as I survey fields, is from now on, for the boundaries of my operation, I'm going to leave a 10-foot buffer on the side of every field.
Or a 10%.
Or a 10% buffer on the side of every field. Okay, well, now we've corrected the problem. I'm probably not going to exceed the areas of operation anymore.
Yeah.
And I've learned a valuable lesson about contingency planning. Every incident or accident is mandatory to log, but you sometimes need to report an incident or accident. There are 4 broad categories of incident or accident that are mandatory to report. If someone is seriously injured or killed, it must be reported. If there is a collision with another aircraft, it must be reported. If any incident or accident occurs with an aircraft over 25 kilograms, it must be reported. And these 3 scenarios are reported to the Transportation Safety Board. If you encounter any incident or accident, no matter how big or how small, while operating under an SFOC, it must be reported to Transport Canada. So this is like the one wrinkle about incident or accident reporting is there's potentially 2 scenario, and there's actually 1 scenario. If you're on a 25 kilo SFOC, you have to report it to both parties.
Yeah, because it's considered an aircraft.
Because it's considered,
over 25 kilos.
Exactly. So these are the scenarios where you are mandatory to report. There's actually one other scenario. It's if they become aware of an incident or accident and they request that you file a report. So if it's not in one of these, but they ask you to do it, then you have to report. The contact information for the Transportation Safety Board can be found in the Aeronautical Information Manual, General Section 3.0. There is a number of offices across Canada, and there's an online form you can fill out, or you can phone or send them an email. It needs to be done as soon as practical after the incident or accident. So this is what the reporting form looks like on the internet, and you can just fill it out and report the occurrence to the Transportation Safety Board. If you are out in the wild and you see a potentially negligent or dangerous drone incident, there is a reporting form. If you are seeing someone flying in an untowards way,
if you want to narc on someone,
if you want to, if someone is flying incredibly dangerously, this is when you would do that.
I've had maybe 1 or 2 instances where it's justified. Like it's like, wow, this is. We talked about one actually, the pit training area flight.
Yeah. Another one I think that we've mentioned in the past is like, let's say that you're attending like a fireworks display and you know that there's a CYR and you see someone flying their drone. That would potentially be a scenario where you could consider. Though, if it is a fireworks display, the person could have been hired by the...
Yeah, that's a tough one. Like, you'd want to know for sure, are these guys here officially, or are they just some random that's...
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've been to fireworks displays in my hometown and seen someone actually flying, like, I think it was an Inspire near where the congregation of people was. It wasn't above people, it was above a building. But I was like, I wonder if this person was hired by the festival to film.
It's... Yeah, like an Inspire is not a cheap drone. So.
No, so that's what led me to believe that it was probably hired because some random doesn't have an Inspire too.
It kind of comes back to the safety vest theory, right?
Oh yeah, if you put on a safety vest, you can get into anywhere.
Because it's like, this guy obviously paid a lot of money for this, and they must be real.
Exactly. Additional tips: you can put your name and phone number on your drone. In case you lose it. If you've lost it in a neighborhood, you can troll the local, or not troll, but you can post in the local neighborhood Facebook group to see if someone's found it. And if you're concerned about obstacles, flying in cine mode reduces the sensitivity or allowing for more controlled movements. And also, the other thing, sport mode on DJI drones disables all obstacle avoidance.
Yes.
This is like most common, maybe not most common, very, very common cause of crash in like... I just bought this drone pilots.
Yeah.
Is they buy the drone, They put it into sport
Because they want to go fast.
because they want to go fast, and they're used to the obstacle avoidance. They're like, oh, it won't hit the tree because it didn't hit the tree before.
Yeah.
Right
Why
into
did it hit the tree?
Why did it hit the tree? Sport mode disables obstacle
Or
avoidance.
why did it land in water?
Exactly.
If you fly these drones over water, the vision system is used to determine how high above ground it is.
Yeah.
And if you're below 10 feet above water, it's reflective. The vision system's completely confused. The LiDAR system's completely confused. It will land in the water because it has no idea the water is there.
Yes.
It's like the number one, I just bought a drone and I crashed it. Or I just bought a drone and it went swimming. And I don't know why, because I didn't read the manual.
Additional considerations for FPV flying: crash in the simulator before you crash in real life. Start in a beginner-friendly mode, like normal or sport. So with a lot of these drones, and especially if you build your own drone, you can tune the sensitivity. So full deflection will be this speed. If you're finding that it's too sensitive, you can tune it. It's like playing back in the day when you used to play Call of Duty. You would set your mouse sensitivity or your
Curves.
controller sensitivity to your preferences. So spend some time fine-tuning your sensitivity. Warm up in an open field, maybe make yourself a little obstacle course, and never say one more shot when you're on your last battery pack.
You never fly your last pack.
Did you write that from experience, Cam?
So for context, when I say this, like I come from the world of mountain biking and that, and we used to go up to Whistler and that, and go up to you ride the bike park there, but you never say last lap, and because something's bound to go wrong, and I get the sense that within kind of FPV, that's kind of where like those two kind of worlds kind of intertwine in a sense. But yeah, I almost guaranteed to say, we're almost guaranteed that something will go wrong on your last pack.
In the FPV world, guys and girls, pilots will carry one extra battery fully charged in their bag. So they have, one last pack. Well, it's not actually my last pack. It's my second last battery.
So some FAQs about drone incidents or accidents. Ian, let's say that, and you would never do this, Ian. Let's say you crash your drone and damage it and it needs to be repaired. Can you, as the pilot, repair that aircraft without sending it to a facility?
Sure. It all depends on the drone and the size and scope of the operation. And then things like, is it serviceable? Is there any kind of limitations on the way it's serviceable? Does it have a manual that tells you how to service it? On a Mavic, as long as you can repair it to the condition that it was before and confirm functionality and everything else is still the same, there's nothing saying you can't.
Yeah. So the issue that you'll actually find mostly is spare part availability.
Yes.
There are certified DJI service centers that they will send spare parts to.
Yeah.
It would be more challenging for you as an end user for them to send you some spare parts. You might have to go through a third-party repair facility or just keep looking around for spare parts. But spare part, like all aircraft, spare parts are the thing that are hard to find.
I think we've done at least one repair video, and that was the Mavic 2 Pro last year. I used Cloud City drones, and they sold me DJI authentic parts, and they're actually pretty cheap.
So there's a follow-up question. You said DJI authentic parts. What about aftermarket parts?
Wow, then you're modifying the drone. And if you still want to use it in controlled airspace or near people or over people, then you're going to need to go back and redeclare it or modify it and become the manufacturer. So you're throwing all that out. Like we've talked about, We've got an upcoming video about props. That's going to talk about that as well.
Yeah. So aftermarket parts, not the most recommended thing if you need to fly controlled airspace or near people. You've now become the manufacturer of that aircraft.
Yeah, that's really what it is. It's not that it's not recommended. It's you're now taking on the liability of being an aircraft manufacturer and having to do all the subsequent paperwork.
Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork involved in proving your safety assurance declaration is valid. Then the other option that we have for DJI are the care programs and the refresh program. So the DJI Care or DJI Refresh, Autel has a similar thing. You pay a certain amount. It's basically drone insurance. You pay a certain amount of money per year. And
$540 US per year for the Evo Thermal, or is that one time for X amount of years?
I cannot tell from this.
I can't quite. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head.
We're gonna put a big flashing thing on screen that says this is either a one time or a yearly.
It's a big old asterisk there.
Yes.
Yeah, because I would imagine it's you pay a fixed price and you get a fixed term. Kind of like an extended warranty.
Yeah, exactly. So, like the DJI Care Refresh, if you've had a drone accident, it's basically hull insurance for your drone.
Yes.
They will just because you've paid this insurance, they will
They'll send you a refurbished
They
drone.
will send you a refurbished drone. They will you send them back your drone
or what's left of it.
And they will either refurbish it or send you a new refurbished aircraft.
Yeah. And you pay a deductible.
Yeah.
It's not like you've paid and then you're done. It's you pay it used to be I don't think there was a deductible, but now they've gone to the premium is lower, but there's a deductible. Yeah. So it is very much insurance.
It is still cheaper than buying a new drone.
And sorry to my friends in the insurance industry, but it's still more appealing at the consumer level, especially to get DJI Care Refresh than to get actual hull insurance.
Yeah.
So, because you're still going to have to go and buy the drone at a retail level, and then your premium's going to go up. Whereas if you use DJI Care Refresh, you're not going to have a claim history with an insurer.
Yes.
And all the premium impact from that.
So let's open it up to questions from the chat.
All right. And while we're doing that, also, we were talking about incident reporting. I did pull up my old incident report, and we'll put it on screen. I'm not going to go through the technical hassle of doing that right now, but it's my old incident report for when I crashed the FPV on a pipeline job. Mm-hmm. And basically what I have on my screen is, first off, the first section is stop, how to deal with the incident, what are the procedures to mitigate any further accident or injury, right? So just remove the hazard, get rid of everything. Do I need to report it? Who do I report it to? In this case, it was a drone crashed into a tree, so it's an internal report. It's not a transport thing. And the drone weighed less than 25 kilograms. It wasn't under SFOC or anything else like that. Emergency contacts I have in there for convenience, like the 1866 weather brief. And I was a little ambitious. I had the JRCC, the Joint Rescue Coordination Center, in here. So
they're gonna come rescue your FPV.
Send the corporate. Let's get it.
Yeah, giant orange helicopter.
When worlds collide, things get a little blurry. Date and time, location, GPS coordinates, as precise as it could be. This was like to 12 digits of precision on the GPS. So yeah. The narrative of what happened, why it happened, right? Kind of determining the root cause. So start talking. I used the 5 whys essentially.
Yeah.
But I was flying the drone low level, coming back from doing a filming of a cable span, and I was like at the end of my last pack, and it had done 3 subsequent great flights, and the lag from the goggles to the drone I think was a little too high, because I was close proximity to trees at high speed, low level, and I didn't dodge that last pine cone. So
yeah. So in that case, so you said the root cause analysis. Did you have corrective action in that report?
Yeah, post-flight notes, pilot and command self-review and reflection on low-level flying in inaccessible areas.
Yeah.
So maybe don't do it.
Yeah. So that would be my thing, is like a lot of aviation accidents come down to pilot error. So when we're talking about root cause analysis or corrective action, it could be, and be honest with yourself. Is it pilot error? And do you need either retraining or to readjust your personal limits? Because, you say that, and we were talking about personal limits earlier. You could say, okay, I'm not going to go flying if there is apparent goggle lag, right?
Yeah.
So,
or you need to compensate for that and give yourself a buffer and recognize that there is a delay or there is a lag, and you can't fly close to things.
Exactly. So this could be a change in your SOPs or just a change in your thinking.
Yeah.
A lot of when we're talking about like aviation accidents, like a lot of things that are human factors caused, we call it human factors. A lot of things that are caused by pilot error, it's just causing a change in thinking, a change in mindset. Now, or as I sometimes like to put it, root cause analysis is the corrective action is get good, scrub.
We've talked about it a lot in the past, but another big part of post-crash is also like one of your requirements when you're doing any drone flight is to know the location of the nearest emergency equipment or safety equipment. So if you don't have it yourself, you should have access to fire blanket, fire extinguisher, especially when you're doing.
And location and operation of emergency equipment is legally required to be in a crew briefing. So if you're operating with a crew, they need to know where it is and how to use it.
Yeah. So like I keep a fire extinguisher in my car. That's like a cheap insurance policy.
Yeah.
Right. Fire blanket is even better. But
or both.
Yeah. But if you're in the woods flying a drone and it's super high fire hazard, Battery fire could set off a forest fire.
Well, we mentioned this in our battery fire episode. There was a forest fire in Colorado, and they determined that the most likely cause was a drone crash and then a battery fire after the drone crash. Most, if not all, accidents can be prevented with good planning. The really way to respond to these accidents is to be cautious going into the operation. Now, things do happen from time to time. Good planning will prevent the vast majority of incidents or accidents.
If you've lost your drone and haven't marked it with your info, you check in periodically with local law enforcement. We would frequently have folks turn in lost items and re-record the serial numbers and then enter it into property. That's a good point. So first off, if the drone weighs more than 250 grams, it should have your C number visible and in a durable manner on it.
That's so they can contact you if someone finds it.
Exactly. But if you don't, yeah, definitely check in locally and see if someone's turned it in or has anyone seen this drone. So hopefully you have your serial number. It should be bound to your account or have it available. But that's a really good point.
Well, when you're buying any expensive equipment, it's best to write down the serial number somewhere. Because then if it gets stolen, then you have a way of proving it.
Exactly. So cars aside, practical common sense applies here too.
For everything. You buy a camera, a laptop, a bike. Thank you very much for joining us on today's episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. I've been Finn with Ian here today. If you've liked this video, please make sure to hit the like button. If you've really liked it, you can hit the subscribe button. Thank you very much for having joined us today on Coastal Drone Weekly Live, and we hope to see you again in the next episode.
I'm sure we will. Thank you again, guys.
Thanks again. Have a great day.